He's Connor Rogers, host of the Fantasy Football Happy Hour with Matthew Berry. You could catch that Monday through Friday on NBC. That's what I've been going to get all my intel done leading up to my draft. We're going to talk fantasy football. Connor, you are the official first reoccurring guest on the Nesson podcast, man. The honor is all yours.
I appreciate that. That's a big honor that I hold with a lot of pride right now.
You guys know him from our convo talking about the Jets. He gave the great Drake May insight, knows his fantasy football as well. Connor, I want to get into it. Drafts are ramping up. These are the most crucial week and a half before the season kicks off next week. Out of the marquee guys that we've seen in the first round, we know the top 3 running backs. We know the top 4 or 5 receivers, however you want to break it down. Who out of those are the most sought? Who's your number 1 running back? Who's your number 1 receiver that if you're picking high enough, you can get after and take?
I think now that the extension is done, you have to go with CeeDee Lamb as the number 1 wide receiver. There was a while where when it was getting scary hours, it felt kind of public jabs back and forth. I could make the argument that Justin Jefferson's being undervalued, and you could take him as the first wide receiver off the board. Even with J.J. McCarthy down for the year, Kevin O'Connell's a good play caller. Sam Darnold is going to force feed Jefferson targets. But at the end of the day, I mean, George, we've seen it, right? With CeeDee Lamb in recent history. We know Dak Prescott is going to throw him the ball a ton. There's no number 2 wide receiver on this offense that you ever even think takes away that much volume. Brandon Cooks is the guy. It's really a Jake Ferguson kind of player. CeeDee Lamb, from a talent, from a target standpoint, everything is there for him to be an absolute monster. He would be my number 1 wide receiver I'm taking if you want to kick off your draft with wide receiver. At running back, it's such a weird way to describe this, but I mean, to be fair, nobody's ever repeated as the number 1 player in fantasy. I'm not taking Christian McCaffrey as the number 1 running back. I have a bad vibe with the injury already from summer, the injury history. I know he was great last year. If people take him number 1, I'm not going to argue and fight with you. I totally understand it. I would be taking Breece Hall, and it goes back to a little bit of the CeeDee Lamb conversation. The volume is just insane for Breece Hall, right? I mean, I understand they have Garrett Wilson through the air, but you can make an argument that Breece Hall most of the time could be the number 2 pass catcher in the Jets offense while getting, of course, workhorse running back volume behind a much improved offensive line with Aaron Rodgers under center. So now there's an easy argument to be made. Bijan Robinson can have that kind of leap with Atlanta. I love him. Obviously, McCaffrey is still good, but if I'm picking a running back first, it's Breece Hall. If I'm picking a wide receiver first, it's CeeDee Lamb, and then Justin Jefferson is a close second.
All right, so Justin Jefferson, the wide receiver 2, it's Sam Darnold at quarterback. I mean, we've seen the ability. Jaron Hall, all the guys he played with last year, still averaging 100 yards a game and putting up ridiculous numbers. What about the Jamar Chase situation? Does that scare you off? Because he's alluded to it with CeeDee Lamb. Got done, got his contract, that's over. But to me, Jamar Chase falls into that. Do I take Amon-Ra St. Brown over him? Do I take Justin Jefferson over him? What do you think with the contract situation with Jamar Chase and him holding in with the Bengals?
For me, the answer to your questions is both, right? I mean, right now, there's a lot to be nervous about with Chase. And I know, he's been a full participant in practice and everything like that. But even getting away with the fact they need to figure out the money, you have an interesting situation that T. Higgins is in a contract year and needs to get, some volume in this offense. You have a really, not viable number 2, but a great number 2. You have the fact that Joe Burrow has been banged up a lot throughout his career. You have the fact that Chase has been hurt at times. I'm just in on the consistency and the floor of Amon-Ra St. Brown and Justin Jefferson over Jamar Chase. And I understand that might not be a popular take, but this is the old adage, right, George? You might not always win your league in the first round, but you can sure as hell lose your league in the first round. And I've done this before, right? You could take a guy that simply just gets hurt week 3, tears his ACL, and that's that. I mean, that's called bad luck. That's not a bad pick. But there are certain situations that there's just something lingering there that you don't feel good about it coming out of round 1. You want to feel good coming out. If you can't feel good at it coming out of your round 1 selection, that's a problem right there. Amon-Ra St. Brown, it makes you feel that way. Justin Jefferson makes you feel that way. Obviously, a lot of people feel that way even, with Tyreek Hill, what he's done, the top running back. So I love Jamar Chase. I think he's a great talent, but I think there are just lingering issues here from the summer that I'm not saying I'm not taking him in the first round because he should go in the first round, but there are easily, 7 players in fantasy that should go over him right now.
Yeah, that's where I sit at 4. Haven't drafted yet. I wish CeeDee Lamb waited today because I wanted him. But at that 4 spot, to me, it's Amon-Ra or it's Justin Jefferson over Jamar Chase. That's the way I look at it every time, I feel like.
Well, you know your league. Who do you think's going to be gone in the 3 picks in front of you in that scenario?
It will go CMC. I do think it'll be Tyreek and then CeeDee Lamb. I do think that'll be top 3. Maybe Bijan sneaks into that. So then I'll have the opportunity of Tyreek or Amon-Ra. Again, 4, I'm thinking Amon-Ra.
Yeah, I don't blame you. I would take Jefferson personally, but I don't like it's a coin flip between the
Right?
floor of him and Amon-Ra St. Brown. And, I get the cold feet towards running back. Taking a running back round one it just always kind of feels funky because you're nervous about the injuries and,
Hmm.
the variance of it as well. So yeah, that's not the we say it on Fantasy Football Happy Hour all the time this year. Actually, 4 is the number one spot we all wanted to be drafting because we think that it's the cutoff that you're going to get a player of the same caliber that was 1, 2, and 3. And then when you go beyond that, there's at least a chance, depending on who you play with, that the caliber, the tier could fall off a little bit. So if you're picking 3, 4, maybe even 5 this year, I think it's the best spot in the draft.
Yeah, I completely agree. Let the tough decisions be made in front of me. I'll take whatever elite receiver falls to me. But you mentioned it. Like it's weird to take those running backs in the round one. What about the guys that turn around with the ADP in the top 24, let's say? So those top 2 rounds, if you're in a 10, 12 team league, standard scoring, let's go with that. Who are the guys you want to avoid that you think are getting drafted way too high, or the guys that are going in those spots that you're saying I'm staying away from?
Oh, it's an interesting one right now. I've seen Devon Chan go really, really high, and I understand he can win you weeks. I think that we're making an assumption that he'll always have enough volume and health to be that kind of guy, like that kind of difference-making player for round 2. Now, beyond that, I understand taking the risk because he truly can win you weeks with his point per game basis. So he's somebody that I haven't been overly hot on. ETN gets volume, but I don't typically find myself with a lot of ETN shares as a whole. I really like Isaiah Pacheco. I think that he's a workhorse running back in a backfield that there's not really anywhere else the ball needs to go in a good offense, goal line opportunity. So I like Pacheco and Derrick Henry because I think the floor for them at running back is great. The guys with questions, we love Jahmyr Gibbs, but is David Montgomery going to steal a lot of goal line work? What is Saquon Barkley's volume in the Eagles offense? So that's how I've been navigating this, where if I come out of round 1 and I didn't get CMC, Breece Hall, or Bijan, and I guess if you're at the end of round 1, I could easily argue for Jonathan Taylor. I think Jonathan Taylor is going to have a monster season. My next targets are Derrick Henry and Isaiah Pacheco. I typically avoid Saquon, Gibbs, ETN, and Achane. And then when you get beyond that, it obviously gets a little dicier. But I think Raheem Mostert is a guy that's undervalued. I mean, the amount of touchdowns he had last year, he's still that guy. Mike McDaniel has brought him everywhere he goes. He's somebody I try to get later on. So the running back strategy is always the most interesting aspect of any draft.
Yeah, when to take them, when to wait, when to reach, and even bringing up a guy like Devon Achane, 5'8", 190, who knows he has the durability to stay in the NFL, and a guy like Jalen Wright, who you could get later in the draft, 205 plus, fast as hell, and the way he ran at Tennessee translates well to running out of the gun, what they like to do with the Dolphins. So let's get into that a little bit. Sleepers, who do you got? Late draft gems, who are guys that drafters and GMs, owners should be targeting?
Oh, man, that's a really good one. Listen, I've been waiting on quarterback, and it's not that they're sleepers, but just at cost guys that I think everything just feels off. It feels like Jordan Love has been severely undervalued. It feels like if you don't want to take a quarterback, like you want to let all your friends in a one quarterback league take them, get Jared Goff for free towards the end of the draft. Jared Goff, I think, plays 14, maybe 15 indoor games this year. 15 indoor games.
Yep.
All you have to do is Google Jared Goff indoor and Jared Goff outdoors. You have indoor Jared Goff for 15 games. I think you could wait on a quarterback, and then you could build your roster throughout, which is more talent in your flex spots when you have that opportunity to wait on a quarterback. So that's a big one to me. A guy that I loved, and now we kind of have to be patient because he sprained his ankle in camp. Tyrone Tracy will take over the Giants' backfield eventually. He was a guy that you can get at the end of drafts for free over and over again. If you want to go really, really deep with the sleepers, I think that Tucker Kraft can actually get more work than Luke Musgrave at Packers tight end. So these are guys like, once again, waiver wire candidates, free kind of guys. Speaking of the Packers, if I'm deciphering that wide receiver room, because they got 4 legit guys, I think Jaden Reed is the guy. He's the Packer receiver that I want to walk away with in every draft. I just think Reed is in for a monster year 2. I think there's such a comfort level with him and Jordan Love. So, yeah, I think when you look at it around that, it's weird. Everybody's catching up on ADP, and it's so hard to find a steal anymore because everybody consumes so much content and runs so many numbers that fantasy football players have gotten so smart, man. I'll say the last one, and this is starting to change. I think he's found his way into the top 30, but there was a while on Yahoo that he was going outside the top 40. Cooper Kupp. Puka Nacua has dealt with an injury all summer. Kupp has had a fantastic camp. Kupp is still a great player and Sean McVay's guy. And when you look at when they played together last year, Puka Nacua's targets went significantly down. So I'm not taking Cooper Kupp necessarily in the first 2 rounds, but if I get Cooper Kupp in the 3rd or 4th round, that at cost projection is just totally different and of value to me.
Connor, this is why you're the best. You went with, all right, who are the sleepers, but guys to target. And I agree with you. It's not just about sleepers. It's when you're going to get them. And if Cooper Kupp's staring me in the face, I want to take him. You also just reaffirm what I've been thinking of. I love Jordan Love in the 7th round and Jared Goff with all those indoor games. 1 open air the first 9 weeks, and then the end of their schedule too, all indoors and against good defenses. This is the stuff I learned from the Fantasy Football Happy Hour. But then I get mad because I know my friends are watching too. So I'm like, all right, I got to be really sneaky. I want to end with this. Any Puka Nakuas you can see of, I'm talking about a guy that's going late, but we could see have a big year in round 3, or just in general, I think a better way to put it is the draft's do's and don'ts you have as everyone's getting ready for their drafts.
You look at the wide receivers taken. I mean, it feels like it's going to be a little bit of a slow burn. Marvin Harrison Jr., Malik Neighbors, they're going really, really early. But then after that, it feels like it's going to be a little while. I think Jalen Polk is going to have his time the second half of the year. I had Polk as wide receiver 5 in last year's draft, so I'm really, really high on him. That would be the guy from this rookie class, but at the end of the day, he went top 40. So, like, it's weird to call him a Puka Nacua, right? When everybody seemed to love him. You want to go deeper than that. I wouldn't be shocked after the Jahan Dotson trade if Luke McCaffrey finds his way onto the field with the Commanders eventually with Jaden Daniels. And it's not going to be 1,400 yards, but is Luke McCaffrey a guy that's going to be a flex streaming option towards the back half of the season? Nothing would shock me with that one. But this rookie class is just very, very different. It's very quarterback heavy. It's star-studded at wide receiver at the top. The Brock Bowers injury is a killer to me because if he came into the season really healthy, it feels like he could be a dynamic rookie tight end in fantasy. But if I don't trust the offense, and now with the injury, you just get a bad feel around that. I'd rather spend big at tight end this year, get one of the top 5 guys. So I think after what Stroud and Puka did last year, we are so ridiculously spoiled. It's going to be hard to find kind of gems at both of those spots.
Yeah, I agree. And again, CJ Stroud, that's a guy you'd have to pay a 4th, 5th round price tag on him. Wait a little longer. There's the Dak Prescotts. There are the Jordan Loves. Or what you
Jordan
said,
Love
the
and
Jared
Dak.
Goff.
Yeah, listen, I love CJ Stroud, but fantasy, the number one thing, you said the do's and don'ts. The don'ts is don't take players that the ADP is affected by name recognition, right? Like you're in a league and say 9 of your league mates are really sharp players and you're all in the same playing field, but say 3 of your players are more casual, more NFL fans than fantasy fans. They are going to draft, on an average, name recognition players like Puka Nacua and CJ Stroud higher than, like I brought up Jaden Reed before. I mean, Packers fans love Jaden Reed. Diehard NFL fans know who he is, but your average NFL fan probably couldn't tell you Jaden Reed had almost 800 yards last year. So that's the big don't for me, is don't juice up the ADP of a name recognition player when fantasy is a numbers game, right? It's a purely numbers game. Go with what the numbers tell you. If at cost, 4 rounds later, I get Dak Prescott, who on a projection basis can be close or just as good as CJ Stroud, at cost, that is a 4-round savings. That is a name recognition or hype train kind of spot right there. So that's the weird balance of it all. You want to draft players you love to watch, but you also need to be very, very careful of that.
Yeah, and also on Jaden Reed, just watching him. Christian Watson, I don't trust his health. Romeo Doubs is good. But Jaden Reed, around the goal line especially, Matt LaFleur is one of the most creative offensive minds in the league. Shanahan, LaFleur, McVay, McDaniels, O'Connell, we know it, right? He knows how to get guys in the end zone. He knows how to get Jaden Reed the ball. He's not dumb. He plays smart. A guy like Jaden Reed, I love that as a gem too. Connor, man, I love talking fantasy. I love talking everything with you. Thanks for taking the time, brother. Congrats on everything. By the way, guys, listeners, viewers, Connor Rogers, newly married. Clap it up for him. And Connor Rogers, a new homeowner in the beautiful part, just outside, north of the city in the beautiful state of New York. So congrats to all that, man, and appreciate you taking the time.
Thanks so much, George. It's always great to catch up with you, man. So I appreciate you having me on.
Always love talking to you. Thanks again, Connor.
All right, great stuff there from George Balekji and Connor Rogers. Now, Ante, I'm not a huge fantasy football player myself, but are you? You dabble a little bit, right?
I do dabble. I was excited to listen to Connor because he had a lot of great insights. So I hope everybody was paying attention to that.
Yeah, now he brought up a couple of big names, which I think you can attest to, but CeeDee Lamb, Justin Jefferson. I guess let's start with the wide receivers, running backs. Where do you think he was at with that? What do you take away from what he said?
His wide receiver number 1 was CeeDee. I gotta tell you, do you know what they say in Florida when you catch like a long touchdown?
I don't, but you're gonna have to tell me.
The young kids are saying this thing called blur, and we're gonna see a lot of that in Miami with Tyreek Hill. So he's my number 1 wide receiver that I think should come off the board. The NFL players rated him as the best player in the entire league, even over Patrick Mahomes, who we know is probably going to end up as the GOAT. Sorry, Tom Brady fans. My thing is, I think speed kills. Mike McDaniel's schemes are going to get him open. He has a lot of fast guys next to him, like Jalen Waddle. He's going to be probably the best guy in fantasy this year as a whole. I don't have a problem with his running backs, but I do want to say this really quickly. I have a couple of sleeper guys that I want to get off my chest really quickly for you, Natalie, just in case you're thinking about playing, okay? I'm
learning from you, Ante.
Right. I think one of the guys from Buffalo one of these 2 receivers, either Curtis Samuel or Khalil Secure, they're guys you can get super, super late. There's no Diggs. Allen's going to throw the ball a lot. He's one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. You got to give him a receiver to go to. One of those 2 guys are going to be there. You can get them stupid late. So that's 2 of the guys you should look at. Zamir White obviously is going to have a terrible quarterback room with the Raiders. So the Raiders are going to do a lot of running the football. Last year, he operated as like a high RB2 guy.